We have huge amounts of peer-reviewed science that say that climate change is happening. What we need to be thinking about is how can we use energy differently? How can we adapt our lives so that we're using less energy in the first place? We know that we have to stop burning fossil fuels, and we are stuck in a very energy-hungry economic system where we are desperately looking around for every last bit of carbon fuel that we can burn. The government really should be spending much more and taking climate change seriously on a systemic basis. There's lots of everyday evidence that people are experiencing that suggests that scientists might have it right.
Hello, I'm Ian Lee. Welcome to the Express Debate, where today we're discussing climate change. I'm joined by Peiser and Bob Ward. Bob, we'll start with you. How real is climate change?
Well, climate change is clearly real and people can see it happening around us. We're seeing the average temperature of the Earth rising. We can see that affecting the risks of things like heat waves. We can see sea level rising. So it's clearly happening and most people can see it happening. We also know that it's humans that are driving that primarily.
Benny, it's real and it's humans that are causing global change and global warming.
Well, climate change is happening, has always happened and will always happen. And the difficulty is to identify the human signal. And it's not that easy because we don't really know very much about the climate hundreds or thousands of years ago, which has changed and possibly in a similar way than today.
Because we have records for, 100, 150 years. Don't we need to go back thousands, tens of thousands of years to see where these changes fit into history?
So climate scientists can look at all the factors that influence our climate, and you simply can't explain the rise in average temperature that we've seen over the last 100 years through natural factors alone. Most people agree you shouldn't just be pumping pollution into the atmosphere and not caring about what impacts it has.
Benny, what do you think about alternative fuel supplies for the future? Where should we be going with that?
I'm all in favour of alternative energy. I'm against picking winners and throwing money at technologies that might not have a future.
For example, which ones do you think might not have a future?
Wind energy, I think, has come to a limit to how efficient it can get. I think solar has a brighter future. The West is in a position where they can subsidize these renewables. Most of the poor countries can't.
And that's part of the problem, is that you've got places like China and in India that are pumping so much stuff out into the atmosphere.
China and India understand that they are much more exposed to the impacts of climate change because they are poor countries than the rich countries. So they take it very seriously. It's not that they disregard it, but they do want to develop. It's easier to put solar power in individual villages out in the countryside than it is to build a massive power network that relies on fossil fuels.
Benny, you look like you wanted to say something there when he was talking about China.
Well, let's face it, China is building one new coal-fired power plant per week. They are planning 500 new coal power plants. So they're not going green. Of course, they're selling to the Greens this idea that they're also building wind farms and solar, but that will only make up about 10–15% of their energy mix by 2030. You have to remember, China's energy demand is going to double. Where's the energy coming from? From wind, from solar? It's a joke. The problem with the Chinese is they have the old coal-fired stations like we had in the 50s. So what they're doing, they're building new ones with the shrubbers, and the pollution will go away just like we still use almost half of our energy with coal.
But we're going to have to invest anyway in new forms of electricity generation because we have lots of old power stations that are being closed down. Coal-fired power stations that are old and polluting, they're being closed down. We need to replace it. Far better to invest in a modern, clean form of energy than looking backward and say we must continue to burn all these old polluting fossil fuels. We see that progress is about new, clean energy. That's where we go.
Here's a suggestion. Why don't we invest more in nuclear?
We have to invest in many forms of energy. It doesn't make sense for energy policy to just be dependent on one form of energy. The idea is to create a market where you let the market decide.
The big bet is that if Britain or Europe are going for the most expensive form of energy generation, which is renewables and nuclear, then other countries will see their opportunity in going for the most the cheapest form of energy.
The final question, a brief answer if you can, gentlemen. Benny, we'll start with you. Are we all doomed?
Of course not. We don't even know whether or not climate change in the next 50 or 100 years will be a big problem, a moderate problem, or a small. We don't know yet because we're not entirely sure how much warming we will see.
Bob, are we all doomed?
If we do not manage the risks of climate change, which are clearly huge, but we know how we can manage those risks by investing in clean energy. We can do this, and it's really up to us. And it's a decision we have to make for not just for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren.
Chaps, listen, I appreciate your time today. Climate change, we don't quite know how bad things are going to be. I know it's getting very hot here, so I suggest we move off somewhere cooler. Thank you very much. Come on.